Story 1. She thought I'd never find out. When I first met Chloe, I didn't think I was meeting the person who'd eventually make me question my entire sense of self-worth. I thought I was meeting the woman who'd finally make me feel at peace. She had that kind of disarming energy, soft-spoken, funny in an offbeat way, always smelling faintly like rain and coffee. She had this thing she did with her hands when she laughed, covering her mouth like she was trying to hide it, but she never quite could. We met through work. Same department, different teams. I was in IT, she was in marketing. We started talking after she spilled an entire cup of coffee on her keyboard and came to my desk for help. I remember how she laughed about it, brushing her hair back, saying she was cursed with technology. I told her I was cursed with Mondays. It was corny, but it got her to smile. For the next few weeks, we'd find excuses to talk. She'd accidentally walk by my desk. I'd happen to grab lunch the same time she did. Eventually, one of us had to make it official. She did. She asked if I wanted to grab dinner as friends who maybe don't have to keep pretending it's coincidence anymore. It felt easy. For once, life didn't feel like something I had to fight with. Fast forward about a year. We'd moved in together. My apartment was small, a little cluttered, but cozy. She'd brought her plants, her candles, her books. I'd brought my gaming PC and a coffee maker that could probably survive a nuclear blast. We worked, cooked, watched Netflix, did all the ordinary couple stuff. There were small arguments. Whose turn it was to do dishes, why she left her shoes everywhere, why I forgot to take out the trash. But nothing that felt dangerous. Until it did. The shift started subtle. She got quieter at night. Not in a cold way, just distracted, always texting. When I'd ask who it was, she'd say, just work stuff. I didn't want to be the paranoid boyfriend, so I let it go. But then there were those little moments that start to pile up when someone's lying. The half-locked phone screen turning away just a little too fast. The late-night team calls that never seemed to show up on her calendar. The perfume that wasn't hers when she came home. The first time I really knew something was off was when she came home from a conference in Denver. It was supposed to be a 3-day trip. The first night she called me from her hotel, cheerful, a little tired. The second night, she didn't answer when I called back, said she'd fallen asleep early. Third day, she got home late, saying her flight was delayed, but her luggage tag read a completely different flight number. And that's when the switch flipped in my head. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I've learned something about myself. When I get angry, I don't explode. I calculate. I started taking notes. Literally. Dates, times, excuses. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I just wanted to see the pattern. Then, one afternoon, while she was in the shower, I opened her laptop. She never changed her password. I'd set it up for her when she started her job. My hands were shaking, and I hated myself for even doing it. But the moment I saw her messages, any guilt evaporated. It wasn't one guy. It was two. One was her ex, some personal trainer named Luke. The other was a guy from her new project team, named Mark. Both threads had the same rhythm. Flirty texts, late-night hotel photos, half-hearted apologies followed by more flirting. One message stood out. From Luke. I still can't believe you're living with him. What would he say if he knew you spent the weekend in my bed? Her reply. He's too trusting. It's almost sad. I just stared at that line until it stopped meaning anything. That night, I didn't say a word. I acted normal. Made dinner. Kissed her goodnight. She smiled like everything was fine, like she hadn't just stabbed me through the chest with 8 casual words. But the next day, I started planning. Revenge, for me, isn't about drama. It's about precision. I didn't want to scream or throw things. I wanted her to look me in the eyes and realize she'd lost the best thing she'd ever had, without me even raising my voice. So I spent a week setting it all up. First, I copied every single incriminating message, photo, and video she'd sent. Not to expose her, but to make sure she couldn't gaslight her way out of it. Then, I reached out to someone unexpected, her company's HR department. See that Mark guy she was sleeping with? He was her direct superior, and their company had a very clear no fraternization policy. I didn't even have to say much. I just sent a polite email saying I'd found some messages by accident and wanted to clarify whether this kind of relationship was allowed between supervisors and subordinates. I attached a few screenshots. Not the dirty ones, just enough to confirm it was personal. Then I waited. The fallout was swift. Mark was suspended pending investigation. Chloe was called into HR that same morning. She came home furious, ranting about snitches and witch hunts. I played dumb, nodding along, pretending to be as confused as she was. By the end of the week, she was fired. HR said it was due to unprofessional conduct. She cried that night, sitting on the edge of the bed, mascara running. She told me she didn't know how it happened. I told her I'd always believed honesty was the best policy. She didn't catch the tone. Not yet. That came later. 2 days after she lost her job, I told her I needed to run to the store. Instead, I went to a storage unit I'd been quietly renting for a month. Inside were all my things, my computer, my clothes, even the coffee maker. I'd been moving them out little by little while she was at yoga. When I got back home, she was on the couch watching TV. I handed her a manila folder. Inside were printed copies of all her messages with both men, neatly organized. On the top page I'd written, "Too trusting." It's almost sad. She looked up at me, her face pale, her mouth trembling. She started to speak, but I didn't let her. I just said, "I hope Luke and Mark appreciate what you sacrificed for them." Then I left. That was 3 months ago. She tried to text me once, a long message about closure and healing. I didn't respond. Last I heard, she'd moved back in with her parents and was working part-time at a local gym. Luke blocked her after she lost her job. Mark's still suspended. I think the company's investigating both of them now. As for me, I got promoted 2 weeks after she left. The quiet kind of promotion that comes with a pay bump and an office door you can close. I bought a new coffee maker because why not? Sometimes I still think about her. Not with anger, just with disbelief. How someone can fake an entire version of love like that. But then I remember how it ended, and I can't help but smile. Because in the end, she was right about one thing. I was too trusting, but only once. That's our first breakup story, folks. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. I'm SpiderFish, and without further ado, let's roll into our next breakup story. He said he needed space, so I gave him the rest of the world. I don't know exactly when I lost him. Maybe it was somewhere between his late-night texts that got shorter, or the way he stopped saying my name when we talked. Or maybe, if I'm being honest, I lost him the moment he started needing space. When Daniel and I met, I wasn't looking for love. I was tired, working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, barely talking to anyone. My world was small. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Then he came along like a warm light in the corner of my vision. He wasn't loud or charming in the obvious way. He was the quiet kind, thoughtful, funny in the little ways, like he'd remember things about me no one else did. He knew my favorite brand of tea, the song I played on repeat when I was anxious, the story about how my dad used to make pancakes shaped like stars. When he listened, he really listened. That's what hooked me. We started seeing each other almost every day. He'd come over after work, bring groceries, cook with me, dance around my tiny apartment to songs only we thought were good. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Or at least I thought it was. About a year in, the first cracks appeared. He started working later, checking his phone more and smiling less. When I'd ask if something was wrong, he'd sigh and say, "You worry too much?" So I stopped asking. He'd cancel plans, sometimes last minute, sometimes with no explanation. Then, one weekend, he said it. The sentence that makes your stomach drop, even before you fully understand why. "I just need some space, okay?" He said it kindly, almost apologetically. like he was asking for a weekend off from a job, not from a person who loved him. I asked him if I'd done something wrong. He said no. I asked him if there was someone else. He said no again, too fast. And then he hugged me, kissed my forehead, and said, "I'll call you soon." But he didn't. The silence was worse than any argument could have been. Days passed, then weeks. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, only to sink again when it wasn't him. I'd stare at his messages from months ago, little things, jokes, random late-night thoughts, and try to find the version of him who meant them. People tell you to give them space, but they don't tell you what it's like to sit in that space, alone, while it echoes. After a month, I broke. I texted him. Just a simple, "Hey, how are you?" No reply. 2 days later, I saw a photo of him. A mutual friend posted it. He was smiling, arms around another woman I'd never seen before. Her caption said, "So lucky to have you." I told myself maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But it always is, isn't it? I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But instead, I waited. I waited until the noise in my chest turned into something dull and hollow, until I could say the words without crying. 2 weeks later, I called him. He answered like nothing was wrong, like we hadn't gone a month without speaking, like I hadn't seen him with her. I said, "I saw your photo." He paused, then quietly, "Yeah, that was it. No apology, no explanation. Just that one syllable, heavy and final." I asked him if he'd been seeing her while we were together. He said, "It just kind of happened." Like love was an accident and breaking mine was a coincidence. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't cry while he was on the phone. I just said, "I hope she makes you as happy as you made me." And then I hung up. Afterward, I sat on the kitchen floor and realized my tea had gone cold. I thought about all the times he'd told me I was too emotional, how I read too much into things. I thought about the nights I'd stayed up worrying about him, defending him to my friends, convincing myself I was lucky to have someone so complicated. Turns out, he wasn't complicated. He was just careless with hearts. Weeks went by. I tried to heal in the small ways. New routines, new playlists, walks after work, coffee with friends. But it's strange how grief hides in corners. You think you're fine, and then one random Tuesday, you catch the smell of his cologne on someone in a crowd, and it floors you all over again. One night, I got an email from him. Just 3 lines. "I'm sorry. I miss you. I hope you're okay." I didn't reply. Not out of pride, but because I finally was okay. Not great, not healed, but okay. He didn't get to come back once I'd done all the work of getting over him. The thing they don't tell you about heartbreak is that sometimes you don't get closure from the person who hurt you. You have to make it yourself, piece by piece. For me, it happened one morning, 6 months later. I woke up to sunlight on the walls, made myself pancakes shaped like stars, the way my dad used to, and realized that the silence didn't feel empty anymore. It just felt peaceful. And that's when I knew. He might have needed space, but I found something better. I found myself again. I waited for him for 2 years. Then he came back, married. I used to believe that love, real love, was something you could wait for, that time, distance, and life could bend. And if it was meant to be, it would somehow find its way back. I don't believe that anymore. The first time I met Adrian, I was 24, broke, and living in a half-furnished apartment that smelled like takeout and detergent. He was older, 29, confident in a way that didn't feel arrogant, just grounded. He had this quiet magnetism about him, like he'd already lived through things and made peace with them. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming party. I wasn't supposed to go. I'd been sick that week and almost cancelled, but something told me to show up. I guess fate has a sense of humor. He was standing by the window when I walked in, holding a drink, laughing with someone about the terrible music. I remember thinking he looked like someone who didn't need to try to be noticed. But when our eyes met, he smiled. That small, warm kind of smile that reaches the eyes. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. He introduced himself, and within minutes we were sitting on the couch talking about everything. Favorite movies, weird childhood memories, the kind of questions you don't expect to answer at a party. Everyone else faded into the background. It felt like I'd known him forever. We started seeing each other after that night. Nothing about it was rushed. He took his time, texted in full sentences, called just to talk, planned real dates. There was a steadiness to him I hadn't realized I craved. For the first time in years, I felt safe. He worked in architecture, long hours, big projects, but he always made time for me. He'd pick me up from work just to drive around and listen to music. Sometimes we wouldn't even talk. We'd just exist, quietly, side by side, watching the world blur by. I thought that's what forever felt like. Quiet, steady, inevitable. After a year, he got a job offer, a big one, overseas. A design firm in London wanted him for an 18-month project. It was everything he'd been working toward. When he told me, my stomach sank. But I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when you love someone. You celebrate their dreams, even when they take them away from you. We sat on the couch that night, holding hands, both pretending it wasn't the beginning of a goodbye. He said, "We'll make it work. I promise." I wanted to believe him. The first few months were okay. Calls, texts, video chats, little care packages sent across the ocean. I'd wake up to his messages, "Good morning, love," and fall asleep to his voice. But as time went on, the calls got shorter. Sometimes he'd miss them altogether. He blamed the time difference, the workload, the exhaustion. I tried to understand. Love is patient, right? One night, after 2 weeks of barely hearing from him, I called. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. Then, for the first time, I saw the notification. User unavailable. Blocked. It didn't last long. A few hours later, the block was gone, replaced by a casual text. "Sorry, babe. Phone died." But something in me shifted that night. He came back for a visit 9 months later. I met him at the airport. He looked the same, but different, like London had carved something sharp into him. He hugged me, kissed me, told me he'd missed me. But the way he said it felt more like remembering than feeling. The next few days were strange. He was distant but polite. We slept in the same bed, but he turned away at night. When I tried to talk about it, he said, "Don't start, please. I just want to enjoy the time we have." I didn't know then that enjoy the time we have meant this is all you're getting. He flew back to London. A month later, the calls stopped completely. At first, I made excuses for him. He was busy. He was stressed. He'd come back when things settled. But things never do they? One day, I checked his Instagram. He'd posted a photo of the London skyline, and beside him, a woman, brunette, beautiful, laughing, his arm around her waist. No caption. He didn't need one. I didn't confront him. There's no dignity in begging someone to admit they don't love you anymore. Instead, I deleted his number, boxed up the things he'd left at my place, the hoodie, the toothbrush, the book I'd never finished because it still smelled like him, and put them away. I told myself I was done, but every time I walked past that box, it felt like there was a ghost in the room. It took months before I stopped checking the time difference between here and London. Months before I stopped drafting texts I'd never send. Months before I realized that closure isn't something they give you. It's something you have to carve out yourself. 2 years passed. I built a new life, moved apartments, started therapy, got a dog. I even started seeing someone new, Evan. Sweet guy, patient, soft-spoken, the kind of man who listens before he speaks. He didn't try to fix me. He just sat beside the broken pieces until I figured out how to put them together myself. And for the first time in a long time, I thought maybe I was okay. Then One morning, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. London area code. The message was short. "Hey, I'm back in town. Can we talk?" My heart did that stupid thing. The one where it jumps before your brain tells it not to. I didn't reply right away. I spent the whole day arguing with myself. Curiosity won. It always does. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. I saw him before he saw me. He looked older. Not by much, but enough that I could tell time had caught up. There were lines around his eyes, a little grey in his beard. He smiled when he saw me. That same warm smile from the night we met. For a second, I almost forgot how much he'd hurt me. Then he said, "You look good." And I said, "You look married." Because there it was, the ring. Subtle, silver, but impossible to miss. He paused, glanced down, then said softly, "Yeah, I am." We sat down. He talked first. Said he thought about me often. Said things had gotten complicated when he was in London. That he'd met someone near the end of the project, and it wasn't supposed to happen. He said, "You were the one who got away." And I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the only thing that kept me from crying. I told him, "You didn't lose me, Adrian. You let me go." He didn't argue. He just looked at me with that same quiet sadness I used to love him for. He said he'd been married 6 months, that it wasn't what he expected, that he wasn't happy, that he'd made a mistake. Then, almost in a whisper, "I still think about you." There was a time that sentence would have destroyed me. Now, it just felt small, because the truth was, I didn't think about him anymore. Not really, not the way I used to. The person I missed wasn't even real anymore. He was just a memory of someone who stopped existing when he chose someone else. I told him I was glad he was doing okay. I told him I'd moved on. He nodded, looked down at his ring, and said, "I'm happy for you." And I think he meant it. When I left, he stayed sitting there, staring into his coffee like it held the version of us he wished he could go back to. I walked out into the sunlight. It was late afternoon, that warm golden hour that makes everything look softer than it really is. For a long time, I thought closure meant getting answers. But standing there, breathing in the crisp air, I realized closure just meant choosing to stop asking the same questions. He'd gotten his happy ending, at least the kind he thought he wanted. And me? I got something quieter. Peace. I went home to Evan and our dog and made dinner while music played softly in the background. I laughed at something stupid he said, and for the first time, it didn't feel like pretending. It felt like living. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about Adrian. Not with pain, just curiosity. About how someone can mean everything to you once, and then one day, they're just a story you tell yourself when you can't sleep. He said he needed to go find himself. And in the end, I guess we both did. He found a life he could live with. And I found one I could finally love. And that's where we'll leave it for tonight. Some stories end in revenge, some in heartbreak, and some just fade out quietly. Not with anger, but with understanding. Love has a way of teaching us who we are, even when it breaks us in the process. If you've ever lived through something like this, I hope you know. It doesn't make you weaker. It just means you felt deeply enough to risk being hurt. Thanks for staying with me through these stories. Take a breath, get some rest, and remember, even the worst endings can lead to better beginnings. This is SpiderFish, signing off.